Now, it's very easy to practice scales without an appreciation for the meaning and the role of each note. I can think back to being a teenager and just practicing scales up and down all the time without really much care for how to use the notes within that scale, and just left with feeling the root as the most important note of the scale, and the rest is just a series of notes you play up and down. Well, today's video is about having a more musical relationship with the major scale, or any scale for that matter. And as I titled the video, it's about exploiting the DNA, how the scale likes to work, so you can create strong musical ideas with any scale. For me, having a more musical relationship with scales and being able to improvise and create with them hinges on appreciating the intervals and having an awareness of the sound quality of those intervals. For the purpose of this lesson, we use the C major scale here, with the intervals of that being root, C, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth. We've got sixth, major seven, then we've got the octave of the root back to C. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you want to be able to sing that. You want to be able to do that with the guitar, to play the first note. Da ba da 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 ba ba ba. And that's just a basic thing you want to be able to do, and back down as well. And it's also about having that association of that scale with your major 7 chord, or just a plain C chord, be able to hear that chord and then hear that scale without needing to play it. Ba da 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 da. And how those two link to one another. And then what we want to do is break down the notes within the scale into 2 separate camps. And we can break this down into chord tones and non-chord tones, with our chord tones being 1, 3, 5, 7, C, E, G, B, with the 1, 3, 5 being the really strong notes of that group of notes, and the remaining notes being the non-chord tones 2, 4, and 6. And we could find those 2 groups of notes in our scale position as follows. C, E, G, B gives you your arpeggio for C major 7. And then we're left with 2, 4, 6, those outside of the chord. Now, this is nice to see, I think, on one string stretched out like this. And you'll see on this diagram, I've labeled the chord tones as red, so you can see it's on, off, on, off, on, off, on, and then because we're back to the root here, you get 2 notes, the 7th and the octave next to each other. So chord tone, non-chord tone, chord tone, non-chord tone, chord tone, non-chord tone, chord tone, then we're back to where we started. I love the simplicity of that, the beauty of that, the fact it's on, off, the way that works. It's just maths in music is sometimes fascinating to me. But if we return to our C major scale here, we should remember that that is the inside sounds essentially. So against a C major chord, that all sounds, you're going to create pretty melodies, but there's no tension, massive tension notes in there. We then want to think about how those intervals sound against the chord, the C major chord, and the function and role of them. So here's a static C major 7 chord in the background. I'm just going to return to the scale position from earlier, and just thinking about each interval against the chord. So the root, C, obviously very consonant, very inside, very strong. So if I play an idea finishing on the root, it sounds like finished business, it works. The second, that's a tension note. What does it want to do? Obviously we can make big loops, but typically, you're going to want to see how it interacts with the notes around it. So for me, the second wants to go down to the root, or up to the third. So if I start an idea on the second, I'll go down to the root, 3, 4. Finished on the root, up to the third. Okay, there's no real outside notes here in the sense of chromatics or anything, it's just the major scale. But you see there, the second, like when I finish on it, dwell on it, it has a tension, but likes to go down to that root or up to that third. When we get to the third, that's the note which makes this chord major. So that's going to be a strong note to finish on. Just playing little simple ideas. The fourth, to F, I think that's more dissonant than the second. What does it want to do? I hope you can feel that it wants to go down to the 3. or it could go up to the 5th. And then the 5th, quite resolute, I think. The 6th. Out of the notes outside of the chord, I think this sounds a bit sweeter than the 2nd and the 4th. And if I finish on it, I can feel like it wants to go down to the 5th. Or up to the root. We've got the 7th. The 7th is obviously part of our chord, probably the most kind of intense note of it. You could finish on it, or maybe it wants to go up to the root. That's where I feel it. Now, all those notes are just taken from the scale. As you can hear, if I finish on 1, 3, and 5, sounds nice and strong. If I finish an idea on the 4th, say, it just feels very unfinished, feels odd. But if I go down to the 3rd, it works. So it's just getting used to how notes function. It's not to say you have to stick to these rules all the time, but it's just getting an appreciation of how you make ideas make sense, I suppose. Now, outside of these notes, we've obviously got other notes also that we can exploit. So let's try those. So the big takeaway there is resolving ideas to the strong notes of the chord. So, and the scale, that's 1, 3, and 5, potentially 7 as well. And then 2, 4, and 6 being, treating them with more care. And obviously jazz is made up of, tension and release. And, you think of jazz as being dissonant sometimes and having outside sounds. And obviously we want to get those into our playing as well, because everything with that scale is very inside, very vanilla. So to get outside of that, we've obviously got the notes which we haven't played. So we played 7 notes there. We've got 5 remaining notes in the chromatic scale. Those being D flat, E flat, F sharp or G flat, A flat, and B flat. So we've got those notes which we could use to create more interest. In relation to our root, that would be there's our root. The C sharp D flat is a flat 2. When against it sounds horrible. But packaged in a line works really well. The minor 3rd, E flat. Again, sounds odd against it, but you go up to the 3rd. It's gonna sound nice, typical bluesy line. The F sharp G flat. That's going to be our flat 5 or sharp 4. Works nicely going up to that 5. Then we've got G sharp or A flat. Ooh, that sounds very tense. That's our sharp 5. Could go up down to the 5th or up to the 6th. The flat 7. Very bluesy against this, because this chord's got a major 7 in, so that sounds really dissonant. But it might be nice, in between going down to the 6th. So there's just a few examples there of integrating the notes outside of the scale for interest. My suggestion to you for practicing to get really to grips with the major scale and take it beyond just playing it up and down and getting used to the sound to be able to create with it is practice playing over static backing tracks, 1 chord backing tracks. The one I've created is available on Patreon, but just playing over a C major 7 chord. If you sing your ideas, and as I said, try and resolve to the strong notes of the chord, then see how you use the 2nd, how you can use the 4th, how you can use those notes outside the scale to create strong musical ideas. And for me, a strong musical idea is something you can remember and you could play again, something you could sing. And then the cool thing about this is if you get to grips with the sound of these intervals, if you played then an F major 7 chord or a B flat major 7 chord, the same things could be found. And if you've trained your ear to the sound of it for C, it shouldn't be such a big job to then find similar ideas for F, rather than thinking of having to learn a scale somewhere else. If you just learn the sounds of these things, how these notes like to behave, it's so much easier to create, takes away a lot of that thought, which you don't want to be thinking about this stuff when you're truly sort of trying to improvise over chord changes. And if you've internalized, got a real strong feeling for how intervals work and like to function, then you're going to be able to create against any major chord. Now over on Patreon, on the Theorist tier, I have additional materials based on today's lesson. As I said, there's the backing track that I was playing over, that's an iReal Pro backing. There's also a PDF with examples in tab and notation that I play through and talk through in an extended video for you to try and practice and get a feel for how these intervals work. So link in the description for that. If you've got any questions based on today's lesson, then please leave them below. Until next time, you take care.